Hey guys, tonight we walk beside one of history's most restless young men, a prince who never quite learned the relaxing art of staying home. The air smells faintly of horses, leather, and Macedonian dust, and somewhere in the distance a war trumpet echoes across the hills. You stand inside a rugged, northern Greek kingdom in the 4th century BCE, where the mountains are steep, the politics are sharper than a spear tip, and your father just happens to be one of the most formidable kings alive. Your name is Alexander, and tonight you're not yet the Great. You're just a boy with an alarming amount of ambition. Now, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, go ahead and post your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where in the world people are drifting off to sleep with these stories. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You grow up in the kingdom of Macedon, around 356 BCE. Compared to the polished city-states of southern Greece, places like Athens, your homeland feels a bit rough around the edges. Think less marble philosophy debates, more mud, cavalry drills, and the constant smell of war horses. Your father, King Philip II, is a military genius. Historically, that's not even an exaggeration. Philip reorganizes the Macedonian army into one of the most effective fighting forces the ancient world has ever seen. The famous Macedonian phalanx, long spears called sarissas, packed into tight formations, becomes the nightmare of every enemy unlucky enough to face it. In other words, you grow up surrounded by soldiers. Dinner conversations probably sound something like, "Pass the bread." Also, we conquered another city today. Pretty normal family stuff. But your upbringing is not just swords and shouting generals. Your mother, Olympias, is a fiercely intense woman from Epirus. Ancient writers describe her as deeply religious and more than a little dramatic. According to one famous story, she sleeps with sacred snakes during religious rituals. You, as a small child, probably find this slightly unsettling. Imagine waking up and realizing Mahm's spiritual hobby involves serpents. Historians still argue whether these snake stories were exaggerated by later gossip, but the reputation sticks. Olympias also constantly reminds you that you are destined for greatness. Parents today say things like, "You can be anything you want." Olympias basically says, "You are literally chosen by the gods." No pressure. By the time you are 13, your father hires a tutor for you. Someone who will shape your mind almost as much as Philip shapes your military instincts. That tutor is Aristotle. Yes, that Aristotle. The philosopher whose ideas will echo through science, ethics, and education for thousands of years. So picture this. You're a teenager wandering shaded gardens, while one of the greatest thinkers in human history lectures you about philosophy, biology, poetry, and politics. Aristotle teaches you about logic, medicine, geography, and the works of Homer. In particular, you become obsessed with the epic poem, the Iliad, the story of Achilles, the unstoppable warrior of the Trojan War, captures your imagination. You start carrying a copy of the poem with you everywhere. Later writers even claim you keep it under your pillow, which is either adorable or slightly concerning if you're planning a future of world conquest. But Achilles becomes your role model. You want glory. You want immortality in stories. You want people thousands of years in the future whispering your name before they fall asleep, listening to history videos. Well, mission accomplished, I suppose. There is another moment from your youth that everyone loves to repeat. A massive horse is brought to the royal court. The animal is huge, powerful, and completely uncontrollable. No one can ride it. Every experienced horseman fails. Your father is about to send the horse away when you step forward. You notice something others missed. The horse is afraid of its own shadow. So you turn the horse towards the sun so it can't see the shadow anymore. Calm it gently and climb onto its back. The horse accepts you. His name is Bucephalus. Mainstream historians generally agree that Bucephalus became your legendary war horse and companion for years. The story of how you tamed him might be slightly polished by later writers, but it captures something important. Even as a boy, you notice details others miss. Philip reportedly watches the whole scene and says something famous. "My son, seek a kingdom equal to yourself. Macedon is too small for you." That line might sound dramatic, but honestly, it turns out to be pretty accurate. By your mid-teens, you're already riding into battle. At 16, when your father leaves to campaign elsewhere, he places you in charge as regent of Macedon. Most teenagers today struggle to manage homework deadlines. You're managing a kingdom. During this time, a nearby Thracian tribe decides to rebel. Not the smartest timing. You respond quickly, leading troops, crushing the uprising, and even founding a city on the spot called Alexandropolis. Yes, you are already naming cities after yourself. A bold branding strategy. Still, the biggest moment of your youth comes a couple of years later in 338 BCE at the Battle of Chaeronea. Philip faces a coalition of Greek city-states, including Athens and Thebes. This is the battle that will decide who controls Greece. You are only 18. Your father commands the army, but he gives you a key role leading the companion cavalry, the elite Macedonian horsemen. When the fighting reaches its fiercest point, you charge directly into the famous sacred band of Thebes, an elite unit legendary for its discipline. The clash is brutal. Dust rises, spears shatter, horses scream, but the Macedonians win. It's one of the first moments when the world starts noticing you, not just as Philip's son, but as a commander in your own right. Still, life inside the Macedonian court is far from peaceful. Philip has multiple wives. Political alliances shift constantly. Rivalries simmer beneath the surface like a pot left on the fire too long. At one wedding banquet, tensions explode. Philip drunkenly insults you and your mother. You fire back. At some point, your father allegedly tries to rush toward you with a sword and trips over himself. You look at the stunned guests and say something like, "Here is the man who plans to cross from Europe into Asia, and he can't even cross from one couch to another." Ancient family drama, everybody. Historians still argue whether this story was embellished by later writers, but it perfectly captures the tension inside the palace. You and Philip reconcile eventually, but the relationship remains complicated. You admire him. You compete with him. And somewhere deep down, you know something else. His victories are not enough for you. You don't just want to rule Macedon, you want the whole world. And very soon, fate will hand you the opportunity, though not in the way anyone expects. The dust of Chaeronea has barely settled, when the mood inside the Macedonian court grows tense in a way that even seasoned soldiers find uncomfortable. Victories outside the kingdom do not always mean peace inside it. In fact, sometimes they make things worse. You return from the battlefield at 18 with the thrill of victory still buzzing in your chest. Greece has effectively fallen under Macedonian control, and your father, Philip II, now stands as the dominant power in the Greek world. The plan forming in his mind is enormous. A massive campaign against the Persian Empire. For centuries, Persia has been the giant looming to the east, wealthy, sprawling, and intimidating. Greek stories still remember the old Persian invasions, the burning of Athens, the desperate battles at Marathon and Thermopylae. Philip wants revenge. But also, if we're being honest, the treasure of Persia sounds pretty appealing. And you are fascinated by the idea. The East feels like a giant unfinished chapter of history, waiting for someone bold enough to turn the page. But palace politics have a habit of ruining exciting plans. Philip marries again. Now, Macedonian kings having multiple wives is not unusual. Still, this new marriage causes a very specific problem. The bride, Cleopatra Eurydice, is Macedonian. That means if she produces a son, that child could claim to be a pure Macedonian heir. You, unfortunately, are only half Macedonian. Your mother Olympias comes from Epirus. At the wedding banquet, the tension finally explodes into the kind of royal argument that historians absolutely love recording. One of Cleopatra's relatives toasts the hope for a legitimate Macedonian heir. You hear the implication loud and clear. Your temper flares. Words fly. Wine spills. Insults bounce around the hall like badly thrown javelins. And then Philip, possibly drunk, lunges toward you. Except he stumbles. The room freezes. You stare at your father, sprawled awkwardly on the floor, and deliver the now famous line, mocking his ability to conquer Asia while struggling to cross the room. It's the kind of comment that probably earns you a few nervous laughs and several horrified looks. Not exactly ideal father-son bonding. You leave the court soon after, traveling with your mother back toward Epirus for a while. For a brief moment, the future of the Macedonian throne feels uncertain. Historians still argue whether this conflict truly threatened your claim, or whether it was just another dramatic royal argument blown out of proportion by ancient writers. Either way, tensions simmer. Then fate intervenes in a way no one could predict. In 336 BCE, during a grand celebration in the city of Aegae, your father is assassinated. The event is almost surreal. Philip is walking into a theater, surrounded by cheering crowds. A bodyguard named Pausanias suddenly rushes forward and stabs him. Just like that, the most powerful king in Greece collapses. The assassin tries to flee, but is killed almost immediately by other guards. Which unfortunately means historians never get a full explanation for why he did it. Some say it was personal revenge. Others whisper about palace conspiracies. And yes, some ancient writers even speculate about your mother Olympias being involved. She had a reputation for creative problem solving, but the truth is murky. Historians still argue whether the assassination was a lone act or part of a larger plot. Ancient politics rarely come with clean explanations. What matters is this: Philip II is dead. You are 20 years old. and suddenly the crown of Macedon sits on your head. Now becoming king at 20 sounds glamorous in movies. In reality, it's a bit like being handed a complicated machine that is already shaking violently, and someone saying, "Good luck, don't break it." Because the moment news spreads, the empire your father built begins wobbling. Several Greek cities start whispering about rebellion. Northern tribes prepare to revolt. Rivals inside Macedon quietly measure whether you're strong enough to rule. You move fast, very fast. First, you secure your position at home. Potential rivals disappear from the political scene, sometimes quietly, sometimes not. Ancient monarchies were not famous for gentle transitions of power. Even Olympias allegedly eliminates Cleopatra, Eurydice, and her child, though the exact details remain debated. Ancient historians report the story with a mixture of fascination and horror. Royal succession, unfortunately, is rarely peaceful. But with the throne secure, you turn to Greece. Cities like Athens and Thebes briefly believe that Philip's death means freedom from Macedonian control. For a moment, the political mood shifts. Then you show up, leading an army, marching south faster than anyone expected. The sudden arrival shocks everyone. Diplomats who were preparing rebellion now scramble for negotiations. Athens backs down. The Greek League recognizes you as Philip's successor and confirms you as commander of the planned invasion of Persia. So the grand campaign your father dreamed of now belongs to you. Still, not everyone is convinced you're the right man for it. In the north, several Balkan tribes revolt. They probably assume that the young king will struggle to control the situation. You march north immediately. The campaign is harsh. Mountain fighting, dangerous terrain, and stubborn tribal warriors. But you defeat them one by one. There's even a dramatic crossing of the Danube River to attack a tribe that thought the river would protect them. Spoiler, it doesn't. Word spreads quickly. This new king might be young, but he is not weak. Then, just when things seem stable, Greece erupts again. The city of Thebes rebels. Rumors spread that you died during the northern campaign. The Thebans decide it's the perfect opportunity to throw off Macedonian control. Unfortunately for them, the rumors are wrong. You march south again with astonishing speed. Within 2 weeks, your army appears outside Thebes. The city refuses to surrender. What follows becomes one of the most brutal decisions of your early reign. After the battle, you order the city destroyed. Thousands are killed or enslaved. The ancient city is essentially wiped from the map. Mainstream historians agree this destruction of Thebes sent a very clear message to the rest of Greece. Rebellion would not be tolerated. It's harsh. Even by ancient standards, it shocks people. But politically, it works. The rest of Greece immediately falls silent. Your authority is unquestioned. And now, at just 22 years old, you stand at the edge of something enormous. Behind you lies Greece, unified, quiet, and watching. Ahead of you lies the Persian Empire, the greatest superpower on earth. Soon, you will lead your army across the narrow strip of water called the Hellespont. And once you cross it, the world will never quite look the same again. The water before you is calm tonight, dark blue under the fading light of evening. It's only a narrow stretch of sea, the Hellespont, what modern maps call the Dardanelles. But standing on the shore, it feels like a boundary between two different worlds. Behind you lies Europe, Macedon, Greece, the lands your father spent decades conquering and organizing. Ahead lies Asia, and with it the Persian Empire, an empire so vast that ancient writers sometimes struggle to describe its scale without sounding like they're exaggerating. You pause for a moment before boarding the ship, not out of hesitation, more like appreciation. Because once you cross this water, things are going to get complicated. The year is 334 BCE. You are 22 years old, commanding roughly 40,000 soldiers, about 30,000 infantry, and 5,000 cavalry. Compared to the Persian Empire's potential manpower, that number is actually pretty small. It's the military equivalent of walking into a very large room and announcing, "I think I'll take over now." Your army boards ships and begins the crossing. Ancient writers record that when you reach the Asian side, you do something dramatic. You throw a spear into the ground and declare Asia won by the spear. Now, historians still argue whether this moment actually happened, or whether later storytellers added a bit of theatrical flair. Ancient historians loved a good symbolic gesture almost as much as modern movie directors. Still, it fits your personality. Before marching inland, you make another symbolic stop. You visit the legendary site of Troy, the city made famous by Homer's Iliad, the story you've loved since Aristotle first introduced it to you. Standing on the ancient battlefield, you reportedly honor the tomb of Achilles. Some accounts say you run naked around the tomb in athletic tribute, which is one way to show respect. Imagine explaining that to your generals. "Sir, the king is doing laps again," but the gesture makes sense in your mind. Achilles is your hero, the warrior who chose a short life filled with glory rather than a long, quiet one. You seem very comfortable with that trade-off. After leaving Troy, your army marches south along the coast of Asia Minor. Persian satraps, the regional governors of the empire, quickly gather forces to stop you. They meet you near the Granicus River. This is your first major battle against Persian forces, and many of your advisors are nervous. One general suggests waiting until morning to cross the river. Attacking across a riverbank into an enemy army is usually considered a terrible idea. You decide to attack immediately. Your cavalry charge straight into the river. Water splashes everywhere. Horses struggle against the current. Persian cavalry wait on the opposite bank with spears and arrows. It's chaotic. At one point, you personally charge into the fighting and nearly get killed. A Persian nobleman swings a sword at your head. For a split second, history almost ends right there. But one of your companions, Cleitus the Black, slashes the attacker down before the blow lands. Historians generally agree this moment likely happened, though ancient writers might have dramatized it slightly. Either way, it becomes legendary. Note to self, always bring reliable friends to battles. Despite the risky opening, your forces win the Battle of the Granicus. The Persian cavalry break first, then the infantry collapses. Suddenly, the western edge of the Persian Empire lies open. Cities across Asia Minor begin surrendering to you. Some welcome you as a liberator from Persian rule. Others surrender mainly because they notice your army standing outside the gates. Both motivations are historically effective. As you move through the region, you adopt a clever political strategy. Instead of ruling these cities directly, you often restore local governments or Greek democratic systems. You present yourself not as a conqueror, but as the champion of Greek freedom. It's excellent propaganda. Also, you still collect taxes. So it's a balanced arrangement. Along the way, strange and fascinating stories accumulate. One quirky historical tidbit involves the famous Gordian knot in the city of Gordium. According to legend, an ancient prophecy claims that whoever unties the incredibly complex knot tied to an ox cart will rule Asia. Naturally, this attracts your attention. You examine the knot for a while. It's extremely complicated. Ropes twisted in every direction, no obvious ends. Instead of carefully untying it, you draw your sword and cut straight through it. Problem solved. Ancient writers absolutely loved this story. Historians still argue whether the event actually happened or whether it was symbolic storytelling created later to illustrate your personality. But it perfectly captures your approach to problems. If the puzzle is too complicated, just slice it in half. Not always great advice for modern life, but extremely effective during ancient conquests. Meanwhile, the Persian king himself, Darius III, is finally preparing a response. Up until now, the battles you fought have mostly been against regional commanders. But Darius is assembling a massive army to stop you personally. The two of you will eventually face each other in one of the most dramatic confrontations of ancient history. But first, there is another challenge waiting along the Mediterranean coast, the city of Halicarnassus. It's heavily fortified and defended by experienced Greek mercenaries working for Persia. The siege drags on for weeks. Sieges in the ancient world are slow, exhausting affairs. Soldiers build siege towers, battering rams, and massive engines designed to break walls. There's dust everywhere, wood splinters. Engineers argue constantly. You personally oversee many of the operations, often wandering dangerously close to the front lines. Your generals probably develop a mild headache watching you do this. Eventually, the city falls, though parts of it are burned during the fighting. By now, your reputation is spreading quickly across the eastern Mediterranean. Some see you as a brilliant young conqueror. Others see you as a reckless gambler who just happens to keep winning. Both descriptions might be accurate. Historians still argue whether your success so far comes more from bold strategy or from the Persian Empire underestimating you in the early stages. Probably a bit of both. But one thing is becoming clear. The invasion is not going to stop anytime soon. You push deeper into Asia Minor, capturing cities, reorganizing territories, and steadily tightening your grip on the region. Every victory brings more soldiers, more supplies, and more confidence. Yet somewhere far to the east, King Darius III is gathering a massive army. Soon, the two of you will finally meet on the battlefield. And when that happens, the fate of the Persian Empire will begin to shift. But tonight, under the quiet stars of Asia Minor, your army rests beside their campfires. Horses chew lazily on grain. Soldiers tell exaggerated stories about the battles they've survived. And you sit awake longer than most, staring toward the horizon. Because somewhere out there lies the greatest empire on earth, and you intend to take it. The road south curves along the Mediterranean coast. Warm winds carrying the smell of salt and pine. Your army marches steadily, boots crunching gravel, shields clinking softly in rhythm. Somewhere ahead, beyond hills, rivers, and a very large number of Persian soldiers, waits King Darius III. And he is finally taking you seriously. Up until now, the Persian response to your invasion has been a little slow. Regional commanders fought you at Granicus. Local garrisons resisted in cities like Halicarnassus. But now the great king himself is mobilizing. The Persian Empire is enormous, stretching from Egypt to Central Asia. When Darius calls for troops, armies arrive from dozens of regions: Persians, Medes, Babylonians, Syrians, and many others. Ancient writers sometimes claim his army numbers in the hundreds of thousands. Modern historians gently raise an eyebrow at those numbers. Historians still argue whether Darius had perhaps 50,000 soldiers, maybe 100,000 at most. Ancient authors loved dramatic exaggeration, almost as much as modern sports commentators. Either way, his army is much larger than yours. But size is not everything in warfare. Your Macedonian army is extremely disciplined. The phalanx infantry fight like a moving wall of spears, while your companion cavalry strike fast and hard like a hammer. If battles were chess games, your army is basically a set of pieces that have practiced together for years. Darius gathers his forces and marches north, hoping to cut off your supply lines. And eventually, the two armies collide near a narrow coastal plain called Issus in 333 BCE. It's an awkward battlefield: mountains on one side, sea on the other, and a small river cutting across the ground. The space is tight, which actually prevents Darius from using his larger army effectively. This turns out to be quite convenient for you. As the battle begins, the Persian center pushes forward with enormous pressure. Your phalanx infantry struggle in the rough ground, their long sarissas harder to maneuver near the riverbank. For a moment, things look dangerous. But then you do what you often do best. You see a weak point. Leading the companion cavalry personally, as usual, you charge towards the Persian left flank, aiming straight toward Darius himself. Dust explodes beneath galloping horses. Spears lower. Armor flashes in the sun. Your cavalry slams into the Persian line. The attack punches a hole through their formation and sends waves of confusion spreading across the battlefield. Soon the chaos reaches the Persian royal guard surrounding Darius. And then something crucial happens. Darius loses his nerve. He turns his chariot and flees. Once the great king retreats, the morale of the Persian army collapses almost instantly. Soldiers who moments ago stood firm suddenly start running. The Battle of Issus becomes a complete Macedonian victory. In the aftermath, something surprising occurs. You capture Darius's family. His mother, wife, and daughters are found in the royal camp, expecting the worst. Ancient warfare often treated captured royal families very harshly. Instead, you treat them with respect. Mainstream historians generally agree that you allow them to keep their royal status and ensure their safety. It's partly kindness and partly brilliant political strategy. If you're planning to replace Darius as ruler of the Persian Empire, treating his family well sends a powerful message. Plus, it makes you look extremely noble in historical biographies, always helpful. Darius himself escapes east, already planning to raise another army. But for now, the western half of his empire lies open. Instead of chasing him immediately, you make a strategic decision. You turn south. This confuses some of your generals. The Persian king is retreating. Why not pursue him? But you have another concern. The Persian navy still dominates the Mediterranean Sea. Many coastal cities remain loyal to Persia, which means they could threaten your supply lines. So instead of rushing inland, you begin capturing the eastern Mediterranean coastline, one city at a time. This campaign leads you to one of the most famous sieges of your entire career, the city of Tyre. Tyre is a powerful Phoenician port built partly on an island about half a mile offshore. Its walls rise directly from the sea, making it incredibly difficult to attack. When you demand entry to perform a religious sacrifice to the local god Melkart, the Tyrians politely decline. Ancient diplomacy translation: absolutely not. So you decide to take the city. But there's a problem. You don't have a large fleet yet, and the city is surrounded by water. Many generals might have shrugged and moved on. You decide to build a road across the sea. Yes, really. Your engineers begin constructing a massive causeway from the mainland to the island, dumping stones, timber, and rubble into the shallow water. The Tyrians respond by attacking constantly with ships, arrows, and fire. At one point, they even send a flaming ship crashing into your siege towers, burning them spectacularly. It's the ancient version of someone flipping the board during a chess match. But you keep building. Eventually, your growing fleet, gathered from newly conquered cities, helps surround Tyre. Siege engines pound the walls while ships attack from the sea. After 7 exhausting months, the city finally falls. The siege is brutal. Ancient sources describe severe punishment for the defenders, though exact details vary and historians debate the numbers. Still, the message spreads across the Mediterranean. You do not give up, ever. After Tyre falls, most other coastal cities surrender quickly. Soon you reach Egypt, and here, something very unusual happens. Instead of resisting you, the Egyptians welcome you. They've been ruled by Persian governors for years and see you as a liberator. Priests crown you as pharaoh. Yes, at 24 years old, you are now technically the ruler of Egypt, which is not bad for someone who started the year crossing a narrow stretch of water with a relatively small army. While in Egypt, you also found a new city on the Mediterranean coast. You name it Alexandria. Subtle branding again. That city will eventually grow into one of the most important centers of learning and culture in the ancient world. But for now, you're already thinking ahead, because Darius III is still alive. And somewhere far to the east, he is assembling another army, bigger than the last one. Soon you will march to meet him again, and the next battle will decide far more than just another victory. It will decide the fate of an empire. The Nile moves slowly beside you tonight, wide and calm under the Egyptian stars. Palm trees rustle in the warm desert wind, and your soldiers, who not long ago were fighting across rocky battlefields in Asia Minor, now rest beside one of the most ancient rivers on earth. It's a strange moment. Just a few years ago, you were the prince of a rough northern Greek kingdom. Now Egyptian priests are calling you Pharaoh, son of the gods, ruler of the two lands. History moves quickly when you refuse to slow down. The Egyptians greet you not as an invader, but as a liberator. For decades, they've been ruled by Persian governors, and Persian rule here has not exactly been beloved. So when your army marches in, temples open their gates, and priests welcome you with ceremonies older than most civilizations. Mainstream historians generally agree that you are formally crowned pharaoh in Memphis. And suddenly, your list of titles gets longer. King of Macedon, leader of the Greeks, Pharaoh of Egypt. At this rate, you're going to need business cards the size of scrolls. Still, Egypt fascinates you. The temples are enormous, the hieroglyphs mysterious, and the entire civilization feels ancient, even by the standards of the ancient world. One of the most famous journeys you take while here is deep into the western desert, your destination, the Oracle of Amun at the Siwa Oasis. The trip is not easy. The desert is vast, dry, and disorienting. Ancient writers claim strange events happen along the way. One story says 2 snakes guide your caravan through the desert. Another says ravens appear to lead you to the oasis when your guides get lost. Historians still argue whether these details are symbolic storytelling added later. Ancient biographies loved sprinkling in mysterious animals whenever something dramatic happened. But eventually you reach the oracle. Inside the temple, the priests greet you and lead you into a private consultation with the god Amun, or at least the god's representatives. What exactly happens inside that temple room remains one of history's little mysteries. Ancient sources give slightly different versions. Some claim the priest greets you as the son of Amun. Others say he addresses you as the son of Zeus, the Greek equivalent of the same god. Either way, the implication is big, divine parentage. Now, whether you personally believe this is still debated. Historians still argue whether you truly thought you were the son of a god, or whether you simply understood the political power of that claim. Either way, the story spreads rapidly across the ancient world. Alexander is not just a king. Alexander might be divine. Not bad for morale. While in Egypt, you also make another decision that will echo far longer than most of your battles. You found a city. Standing on the Mediterranean coast, you select a location near a small fishing village called Rakotis. The site has a good harbor, access to the Nile, and strong trade potential. Your engineers begin planning streets, harbors, markets, and temples. Naturally, you name the city after yourself, Alexandria. Ancient conquerors were not known for modesty. Still, it turns out to be an excellent decision. Alexandria will eventually grow into one of the greatest cities in the world. It will house the famous Library of Alexandria and become a center of science, philosophy, and learning for centuries. But for now, it's just lines drawn in sand by surveyors under the Egyptian sun. Your time in Egypt is relatively peaceful compared to the rest of your campaign. Soldiers rest, supplies rebuild, engineers plan cities. Yet you know the calm will not last. Because far to the east, Darius III has been very busy. After his defeat at Issus, he retreats deep into the Persian Empire and begins assembling another army, larger than the first. This time, he plans to meet you on ground of his choosing, a wide open plain where his superior numbers can actually matter. He sends you a letter offering peace. The proposal is generous. Land west of the Euphrates River, a massive ransom for his captured family, and even the hand of his daughter in marriage. Some of your generals think you should accept. Parmenion, one of your most experienced commanders, reportedly says something famous. If I were Alexander, I would accept. You answer calmly. So would I, if I were Parmenion. Translation. Nice suggestion, but no. Because you are not here for half an empire, you are here for all of it. So in 331 BCE, you leave Egypt and march east again. Your army crosses deserts and rivers, moving steadily toward Mesopotamia. Scouts report that Darius is waiting near a place called Gaugamela. Unlike Issus, this battlefield is enormous and flat. Persian engineers have even cleared the terrain so chariots can charge easily. This time, Darius intends to use everything he has. His army includes cavalry from across the empire, armored infantry, and even scythed chariots. Vehicles with spinning blades, designed to tear through enemy formations. It's the ancient equivalent of a very aggressive lawnmower. Your army is still smaller, but your soldiers are veterans now. They've marched thousands of miles with you, fought sieges, crossed deserts, and survived countless battles. They trust you, and you trust them. The night before the battle, your generals suggest launching a surprise attack in the dark. You refuse. "I will not steal my victory," you say, which sounds noble. Though historians sometimes wonder if attacking at night with thousands of soldiers might have been chaos anyway. So the armies wait for dawn. Soon the sun will rise over the plains of Gaugamela. And when it does, the largest and most decisive battle of your entire campaign will begin. Dawn arrives slowly over the wide plains of Gaugamela. The air is cool, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. Unlike the cramped battlefield at Issus, this place feels enormous. Flat land carefully prepared by the Persians, so their massive army can move freely. You stand beside your horse Bucephalus, watching the sunlight creep across the distant lines of soldiers. And there are a lot of them. Across the plain, the army of King Darius III spreads like a dark sea of armor and banners. Persian cavalry fill the wings. Infantry stand thick in the center, and somewhere among them gleam the terrifying scythed chariots, two-wheeled machines fitted with spinning blades designed to slice through formations. Ancient writers sometimes describe the Persian force here as hundreds of thousands strong. Modern historians gently tap the brakes on that idea. Historians still argue whether Darius might have had perhaps 50,000 to 100,000 troops, still significantly more than your roughly 40,000 soldiers. But numbers alone rarely decide battles. Your army forms up carefully. The Macedonian phalanx stands in the center, rows of soldiers gripping their long sarissas like a forest of spears. On the right flank, you position yourself with the companion cavalry. You prefer to lead from the front. Your generals probably prefer that you stop doing that. But here you are. As the sun climbs higher, the battle begins. The Persian army advances first. Cavalry move along both flanks, attempting to surround your smaller force. The scythed chariots begin their charge, racing across the plain with blades spinning. It looks terrifying. But your soldiers are ready. At your command, the phalanx opens small gaps in its formation. When the chariots reach the lines, they pass harmlessly through the openings, while soldiers stab the horses and drivers. The terrifying war machines quickly become very expensive scrapwood. Meanwhile, the real fight begins across the battlefield. Persian cavalry press hard on your left flank, threatening to overwhelm your troops there. Dust clouds rise as horses crash together and spears splinter. For a moment, it looks dangerous, but your attention is focused somewhere else because you see something. As the Persian army stretches to attack your wings, a small gap opens near the center, between Darius and part of his line. A narrow opportunity. You immediately move, leading the companion cavalry in a tight wedge formation. You charge straight toward that gap. Horses thunder forward, spears lower. Your cavalry punches through the opening like a spear itself, driving directly toward the Persian king. Suddenly, Darius finds himself in a very uncomfortable situation. The enemy king is riding straight toward him. Again. At Issus, this moment caused panic. And once again, history repeats itself. Darius turns his chariot and flees the battlefield. When word spreads that the great king has abandoned the fight, the Persian army begins collapsing into chaos. Some units keep fighting bravely. Others start retreating. The enormous formation begins unraveling across the plain. The Battle of Gaugamela becomes the decisive victory of your campaign. Mainstream historians widely agree that this battle effectively ends the Persian Empire as a major power. Darius escapes again, but his authority is shattered. You ride across the battlefield as the sun sets, dust and smoke hanging in the air. Another empire has just fallen, but your campaign is far from over. Because now you begin capturing the heart of Persia itself. First comes Babylon. When your army approaches the great city, its gates open peacefully. Babylon is one of the largest and most ancient cities in the world, famous for its towering walls and legendary gardens. The people welcome you as their new king. Ancient sources describe grand celebrations. Priests greet you, temples perform rituals, and the population pours into the streets. If you were keeping a conquest checklist, Babylon would be a very satisfying box to tick. Next comes Susa, another major Persian capital. Here you discover enormous royal treasuries, vast quantities of gold and silver accumulated over generations of Persian rule. The treasure is almost unimaginable. Some historians estimate the wealth captured here equals tens of thousands of talents of precious metal. In modern terms, we're talking billions. Your soldiers suddenly become extremely motivated to keep conquering. Then, during a grand feast, one of your companions, a woman named Thais, supposedly suggests burning the Persian palace as revenge for the Persian destruction of Greek temples during earlier wars. The idea spreads quickly through the drunken crowd. Soon torches are raised. Flames begin climbing the wooden structures of the palace complex. Ancient writers describe you joining the procession carrying a torch. Historians still argue whether the burning of Persepolis was a deliberate political statement or simply a drunken mistake that got out of control. Either way, the magnificent palace complex is badly damaged by fire. Later, you reportedly regret the decision, which is understandable. Burning historical landmarks rarely ages well. Meanwhile, Darius III is still alive, fleeing deeper into the eastern provinces. You pursue him across vast distances, determined to finish what began years earlier when you first crossed the Hellespont. But the end of Darius will not come the way you expect, because before you can catch him, his own followers will betray him. And when you finally find the fallen king of Persia, lying wounded in a wagon on a dusty road, the war that made you conqueror of an empire will quietly come to an end. The chase stretches eastward across the vast lands of the former Persian Empire, through dry plateaus and wind-swept valleys where the air grows thinner and colder than the warm plains of Babylon. Your army marches steadily, but the tone of the campaign has changed. The Persian Empire, at least the one ruled by Darius III, is already collapsing. After the defeat at Gaugamela, the great king fled east, hoping to gather support in the distant provinces. But loyalty in empires can be flexible, especially when the emperor keeps losing battles. Eventually, one of his own commanders, a satrap named Bessus, decides he has a better idea. Instead of continuing the retreat, Bessus arrests Darius. Yes, the King of Kings becomes a prisoner in his own army. The plan, apparently, is to negotiate with you, or perhaps even declare Bessus the new king. Ancient power struggles often involve this sort of ambitious improvisation. You pursue them relentlessly across Mesopotamia and into the eastern territories. The chase becomes exhausting. Your army travels incredible distances under harsh conditions, pushing through deserts and mountain passes. Even your seasoned soldiers begin to feel the strain. But eventually you catch up, sort of. When your scouts find Darius, he is already dying in a wagon abandoned by his captors. Bessus and his allies stabbed him and fled when they realized your forces were getting close. It's a strangely quiet end for the ruler of one of history's greatest empires. Ancient writers describe you approaching the fallen king and covering his body with your cloak, a gesture of respect toward a defeated enemy. Mainstream historians generally agree you arranged a royal funeral for Darius according to Persian customs. Politically, it's also a smart move. By honoring Darius, you present yourself not merely as the conqueror of Persia, but as its legitimate successor. From this moment forward, you begin adopting more elements of Persian royal tradition. You wear aspects of Persian dress. You include Persian nobles in your administration. You even encourage marriages between Macedonian officers and Persian women. Some of your soldiers find this deeply uncomfortable. They signed up to conquer Persia, not become Persian. Historians still argue whether these policies were sincere attempts at cultural integration or simply practical strategies for ruling such a massive empire. Probably both. Meanwhile, Bessus declares himself the new Persian king under the name Artaxerxes V and tries to rally resistance in the eastern provinces. You are not amused. The pursuit continues into regions that many Greek and Macedonian soldiers have barely heard of. Bactria and Sogdiana, territories located in what is now Central Asia. Your response is creative. You gather skilled climbers and offer rewards to anyone who can scale the cliffs at night using tent pegs and ropes. By morning, dozens of your men appear above the fortress walls. The defenders look up, see Macedonian soldiers literally standing on the cliff above them, and quickly decide surrender might be the wiser choice. Apparently, flying is optional if you're willing to climb like a determined mountain goat. Around this time, something else happens that will change your personal life. During the campaigns in Central Asia, you encounter a noblewoman named Roxana, the daughter of a local Bactrian leader. Ancient writers describe her as extraordinarily beautiful. Soon after meeting her, you decide to marry her. Unlike many political marriages among ancient rulers, this one seems to have involved genuine affection, at least according to several historical sources. Your Macedonian companions are a little surprised. After all, kings typically arrange marriages for strategic alliances. But here you are, deep in Central Asia, falling in love during a military campaign. Conquering empires clearly leaves room for romance. Eventually, Bessus is captured by your forces. He is handed over to Persian officials loyal to you and punished for the betrayal and murder of Darius. With that, the last serious claimant to the Persian throne disappears. You are now, in effect, the ruler of the largest empire the ancient world has seen. But for you, it's still not enough, because beyond the mountains to the east lies another land spoken of in rumors and travelers' stories. India. In Greek imagination, India sits at the very edge of the known world, a place of strange animals, immense rivers, and legendary wealth. Naturally, you want to see it. Your army, however, is beginning to look tired. They have marched more than 10,000 miles since leaving Macedon. They have fought dozens of battles, crossed deserts, climbed mountains, and adapted to entirely different cultures and climates. Still, when you announce the next campaign, they follow, because they always have. So you lead them across the Hindu Kush mountains and down toward the Indus Valley. There you encounter new kingdoms, unfamiliar landscapes, and perhaps the most unusual battlefield challenge yet: war elephants. The most famous of these encounters comes at the Battle of the Hydaspes River against King Porus in 326 BCE. Porus commands a powerful army and dozens of massive elephants towering over the battlefield like moving fortresses. Your soldiers have never fought anything like them. The battle becomes fierce and chaotic. Horses panic at the sight of the enormous animals. Infantry struggle to avoid the swinging trunks and tusks. But eventually, your tactical flexibility wins the day. Porus is captured. When he is brought before you and asked how he wishes to be treated, he answers simply, like a king. You smile, and you grant his request. You restore him to his throne as a local ruler under your authority. It's another moment where your reputation grows, not just as a conqueror, but as a ruler capable of respecting worthy enemies. But as your army continues eastward, something finally begins to change. The monsoon rains fall relentlessly. The jungles grow thick and unfamiliar, and your soldiers begin whispering something they have never said before. Maybe, "It's time to go home." The rain begins long before dawn. At first, it's just a soft tapping on tents and shields stacked beside the campfires. But soon the skies open fully, and the monsoon pours down over the jungle landscape like the world's largest bucket has been tipped over. Your army sits deep in northern India now, far beyond the lands any Greek or Macedonian soldier had imagined when they first crossed the Hellespont years ago. The air is thick and warm. Strange birds call from the trees. Rivers swell with muddy water. And somewhere farther east, beyond the horizon, rumors speak of even greater kingdoms, armies larger than anything you've faced so far. You want to keep going. Of course you do. To you, not the respectful silence your speeches usually receive. A different kind. Finally, one of your trusted generals, Coenus, steps forward and speaks for the army. The soldiers are exhausted. They've marched roughly 8 years across Asia. They've fought countless battles, crossed deserts, mountains, and jungles. Many have not seen their homes since they were young men. And now, the monsoon rain falls endlessly. The army has reached its limit. Ancient sources describe the soldiers standing silently, refusing to move forward. No rebellion, no shouting, just quiet determination. For perhaps the first time in your life, your will alone is not enough to move an army. Historians still argue whether you truly intended to conquer the entire Indian subcontinent, or whether this moment was always going to be the natural endpoint of the campaign. Either way, the reality is clear. You cannot conquer the world without soldiers willing to follow you. So after several days of waiting, hoping the army will change its mind, you finally accept their decision. The campaign eastward ends. To mark the furthest point of your journey, you order giant stone altars built along the river. They stand as monuments to how far the Macedonian army traveled from home. Then the long journey back begins, and returning, it turns out, is just as dangerous as conquering. One famous story tells how a small group of soldiers once finds a helmet filled with precious water and brings it to you. Instead of drinking it, you pour the water onto the ground in front of everyone. If the army cannot drink, the king will not drink either. It's a powerful gesture, and it lifts morale, even if it does absolutely nothing to improve hydration levels. Eventually, the survivors reach safer lands and reunite with the rest of the army. Years have passed since the invasion began. When you finally return to the great city of Babylon in 323 BCE, your empire stretches across 3 continents, from Greece and Egypt all the way to India. It is the largest empire the world has yet seen. You begin making plans, more campaigns, possibly into Arabia, new cities, cultural integration across your vast territories. Your vision seems endless. But history sometimes moves in quiet, unexpected ways. One evening in Babylon, after days of feasting and planning, you fall ill. The exact cause remains one of history's great mysteries. Some ancient writers suspect poison. Others suggest malaria, typhoid fever, or complications from previous wounds. Historians still argue whether your death came from illness, infection, or something more mysterious. But over several days, your condition worsens. Your generals gather around your bed as your voice grows weaker. According to one famous story, someone asks who should inherit your empire. You whisper a simple answer: to the strongest. Whether those exact words were spoken is debated, but they perfectly capture what happens next. Because when you die at just 32 years old, your enormous empire has no clear successor. Soon your generals will divide it among themselves in a series of struggles known as the Wars of the Diadochi. The empire you built will fragment into new kingdoms. And yet, your influence does not vanish. The cities you founded, especially Alexandria, become centers of knowledge and culture. Greek language and ideas spread across the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East in what historians call the Hellenistic Age. Philosophy, science, and trade flow across regions that once barely knew each other. Your campaigns reshape the ancient world. Now, as the story slows and the lights of Babylon fade into the quiet distance, you can almost imagine the young prince you once were, the boy reading about Achilles by lamplight, dreaming of glory. You traveled farther than almost anyone in your time. You changed the course of history. And like the heroes of the stories you loved, your life burned bright, but not long. The empire fades into the soft darkness of history, but the legend remains. And somewhere tonight, thousands of years later, someone whispers the name Alexander the Great, just before drifting off to sleep. Word count: 1,108. As the story settles, the night grows quieter. Imagine the great city of Babylon resting beneath a warm, gentle sky. The desert wind moves softly through palm trees along the Euphrates River. Lanterns flicker in distant courtyards, and somewhere far away, a soldier hums a tired song after a long journey. The world you once marched across is finally still. The armies are gone now. The thunder of hooves and clash of shields have faded into distant memory. All that remains are the quiet roads connecting the cities you founded, the marketplaces where travelers from Greece, Egypt, and Persia now speak the same language of trade. History rarely pauses, but tonight it feels like it has slowed to a comfortable whisper. Perhaps you can picture the young king again, not the conqueror riding into battle, but the thoughtful student walking beneath shaded trees with Aristotle, carrying a copy of the Iliad and dreaming about the edge of the world. He never truly found that edge. Maybe there isn't one. Empires rise, expand, and eventually soften into stories told beside late-night lamps and quiet videos meant to help people drift gently into sleep. And now the journey winds down. The torches dim. The desert breeze cools. The long roads of Alexander's empire stretch peacefully into the distance. So wherever you are tonight, let the story settle like soft dust after a long march. Breathe slowly and rest.